Ranking member, the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Interesting last comment there. We may get back to that as this issue of Faithful and how that actually turns out. But I do want to go back to something that you and Ms. Professor Vance have both talked about, and it's this issue of did Mueller investigation, did they were going to charge or not charge based on OLC opinion. It's an interesting concept, especially when you go back to not was the final charge from Mueller, but then to Bill Barr himself when actually giving the report the ultimate charging authority here. And it said in the letter, the first letter that came from the Attorney General, he said, after reviewing the special counsel's final report on these issues, consulting with department officials, including Office of Legal Counsel, and applying the principles of federal prosecution that guide our charging decision, the Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein and I have concluded that the evidence developed during the special counsel investigation is not sufficient to establish that the President committed an obstruction of justice offense. Our determination was made without regard to or based upon any limitations based on these considerations surrounding the indictment. Interesting, this has been discussed later on because it became after the discussion, there was a joint statement put out by the Attorney General's office and by the special counsel office that said this. The Attorney General has previously stated that the special counsel repeatedly affirmed that he was not saying that but for the OLC opinion, he would have found the President obstructed justice. The special counsel's report and his statement today made clear that the office concluded that it would not reach a determination one way or the other about whether the President committed a crime. And there's no conflict between these statements. So I think the interesting part that is coming along here is this discussion on the fact that it does appear, and you can take one part saying he was bound by this and you can go on that, but the Attorney General made it very clear that when he looked at it and it was up to him if he wanted to move forward with charge, he chose not to charge because Mueller had gave it to him and took into account the special counsel determination, and then later on with the special counsel himself saying that he wasn't going to charge either way and was not bound by this opinion. My question becomes, though, you've got great opinions, both of you, on these issues of obstruction. But again, as I said before in the starting of this, the main priority, and you both mentioned this, was the Russian interference in our elections. Ms. McQuaid, I have a quote, and it was a tweet from you. It says, "Hey, Mueller, look over here. At Maddow has found the collusion. Follow the sanctions. If this whole cable news thing doesn't work out for you, Rachel, you have a real future in the FBI." This was December 1, 2018. I have a question. Do you, yes or no, do you and Rachel Maddow have evidence of collusion that the special counsel didn't have?
Well, you know, collusion is an interesting term, Mr. Congressman Collins, and it's a term that Robert Mueller in his report says I didn't use because it's kind of confusing. And so ultimately, after reading his report, what he says is, I wasn't able to establish the crime of conspiracy, but he did document numerous contacts between Russia and the Trump campaign. In fact, right at the very beginning of the report, at page 1.
And Ms. McCabe, I want to jump in here because I agree you can read the report. The question, you just made an interesting comment, though, in which many of us have said about this issue of collusion, which there was not. But I've had many, even members of Congress and others, continue this that there's collusion in plain sight. The President's committed a crime. And when you just stated the original process here, but my question is, and I'm assuming it's a no, you don't have any more information or evidence than we have here. John Dean, just to...
I'm sorry, is that a question? May I answer?
No, that was... Got a minute and 57. I'm bound by the 5 minute.
I'll refer to page 1 of the report.
And I've read it. Mr. Dean, interesting. You talked about the issue of pardon, but actually in the Mueller report itself, when it talked about the pardon, and you discussed it where Nixon said he shouldn't have, the actual quote on page 122 of this was, "I don't want to talk about pardons for Flynn yet." In fact, the President actually said, he never offered a pardon. He didn't want to talk about it. So again, here's our issue here, and you made the best of all the concerning of this right now. When you start off saying, I'm not a fact witness. Neither are others. We're simply here conjecturing opinions in law school, and for those of us writing notes feverishly, I feel like, Professor, we're back in law school again. But at the end of the day, where we're headed with this is the concern that I have is that we have, going back, and the discussion was here for later on, what does this committee have that Robert Mueller didn't have? What does this committee have? When you go through the Literally 19 lawyers, 40 FBI agents, 2,800 subpoenas, 500 social. We barely can get through most of our work week without stopping up. So I think the question and concern for most of us here is this is not a redo, as the chairman, it is a redo from a weaker position, and simply goes back to what has always been said here. This is a political consideration, not a criminal. We're not an investigator. There's plenty more that I would like to have answered here. We just unfortunately are bound by our times on this, and with that, I'll have to yield back to the chairman.
Mr. Chairman, may
The
I?
time has expired. The witness may answer the question.
Yeah, the question was addressed to me, and I think that this committee does have a role, and it is adding something that the special counsel could not, and that's public education. This report has not been widely read in the United States. It's not even been widely read in the Congress from some of my conversations, but I think it's a very important function that the committee is serving by bringing these matters to public attention.
I appreciate that, and for the educational purposes, I really meant it more as a statement and not a question.